Hey guys, how are you? We're up to video 3.3, and where are we going today? We're going to go to Japan. And what you're going to notice with Japan is it's going to have a similar experience with Europe that China did. It's going to end up isolationist. So in the 1300s, Japan had developed unity under the shoguns, these military rulers. 1467, civil war breaks out that shatters Japan's feudal system. The country slipped into chaos as violent and disorder followed. So they had the kind of the feudal pyramid that shatters and leads to this warring states period. Eventually, powerful samurais gain control and offer protection to the peasants in return for loyalty. So on some level, feudalism returns. Their new system of feudalism resembled that in Europe, with castles, small armies, and now muskets. So Daimyo are warrior chieftains who became lords in Japan. Alright? And the first one we're going to really talk about is Oda no Bangun. Alright? He is the most important one. He's the one that basically comes into a vacuum and fills it. He seized the capital in 1568. He believes in ruling by force. He's brutal. He's tough on his opponents. He's ambitious. He's a daimyo who hoped to gain power and take control of the whole country. And that's his kind of campaign. Rule the empire by force. And what he's really known for is the ability to start Japanese unification. He doesn't fully unify it. What's interesting, random kind of story about him, he committed seppuku, which is the ritual suicide of a samurai in 1582 when his generals turned on him. Alright? So he, Oda Nobunaga, is the first one to try to unify Japan. What's important about him is he used muskets. It's the first time firearms are really used in Japan. And kind of interesting is this seppuku, which he commits when basically if one of his generals isn't willing to listen to him anymore, he's going to end his life. Remember, he invades Korea in 1592, and when he dies, his troops withdrew for Korea, so he's involved in Japan and Korea. Alright, the next one, Tokugawa Ieyasu. Tokugawa is the next one. He's Nobunaga's best general. He's continued his mission of destroying the daimyo that remained hostile. So there's a whole bunch, there's a whole level of, in the feudal pyramid, of daimyos. What Oda and Toyotomi are going to do is try to crush those daimyo so they can unify power in themselves. By 1590, he gets control of most of Japan. He wanted to conquer China, so he sent troops to Korea, and he becomes allies with the Mings. Important. Remember, Japan, little island, right? Over here's China. They've got a ton of natural resources. Time and time again, you're going to see Japan attack into China and into Korea, trying to get their supplies. Again, when Hideyoshi dies in 1598, his troops withdraw from Korea. Alright, so Oda tries it, doesn't get it done. Alright, and his replacement, Toyotomi, tries the same thing. He's much more successful in unifying Japan, but neither of them able really to take Korea. Alright, so our last leader we're going to talk about is Tokugawa Ieyasu. Tokugawa is the one who completes the unification of Japan. By 1600, he's defeated all the rivals. He becomes the sole ruler of Japan. He tamed the daimyo at the local level, requiring them to spend every other year in the capital. The capital, in fact, at this time, I want to say is pronounced Edo, and that's really what we now know as Tokyo. But think about it. By having this alternate attendance policy, he was able to get control of the daimyo. He founded the Tokugawa Shogunate, the dynasty of shoguns that ruled until 1876. Alright? Take care of the people, strive to be virtuous, never neglect to protect the country. He creates a very, very structured society. Japan starts to make the move from EIEIO, rural, to hi ho, hi ho, hi ho, off to work I go, and then become more urban. Think about it, if you've got this little island, farming's not going to work because it's going to take up too much space. He did increase some employments for women, opportunities for women. He still stays traditional. Remember, here is our flow. You've got Oda, Toyotomi, and then Tokugawa. Alright, and Tokugawa Adachi becomes the leader, basically, of the shoguns. He's the one who's going to take control and rule Japan. Alright? Remember, key thing, Japan an island, China, Korea, mainland. Alright? Oda thinks about taking it over. My boy Toriyami attacks. When he dies, they retreat. And more importantly, when Tokugawa takes control, he unifies all of Japan into one country. Other things about him, again, unified Japan in 1600, moves the capital to Edo, which is modern day Japan, and if you notice where Edo is located, fairly accessible for the entire country. Alright, he gets control of the Daimyo, the rule of law overcomes the rule of swords. So they become a country ruled by laws, not by swords. He increases food production, increases, again, more food, more happiness, more babies. He creates a merchant class and the rich prosper. The poor kind of struggle, women are kind of trapped in, but what he starts to do is he starts to encourage culture. We start a real interest in Japanese urban fiction and haiku. Alright, haiku, as many of you know, is a form of poetry. Speaking of Japan, here's my favorite baseball player of all time. Shinjo was a New York Met for a few years. He was awesome. I loved him. Unfortunately, he didn't stay very long with the Mets. He had this thing called talent, so they didn't really like it. Alright. We've already talked about this. So you get this long period of civil war. This is the warring states period. You get the Daimyo, the military leaders taking control. You've got the attempts by Oda. Alright, and then don't forget, after Oda, you go to Toyotomi, and then finally Tokugawa takes control. He's the one who unifies Japan. He's the one who uses the alternate attendance palace. He gets control of the Daimyo. What's life in Japan like? Very structured. So you've got the emperor at the top. You got the military commanders here who have a lot of the power. You got the daimyo, the knights as you would. And then you've got the samurais, the peasants, the artisans, and the merchants. What we're going to see is very quickly the merchants are headed up. Alright? Again, they're going to believe in Confucianism. They're going to talk about agriculture. They're going to believe peasants made for an ideal society, which thinks for the peasants is they paid a ton of the taxes. And again, movement from farming to other jobs. Who wouldn't want to be a samurai? So much cooler than being a farmer. No offense, people. Okay, so by 1700, Japan has begun to shift from rural to urban society. Again, E-I-E-I-O, off the farms, into cities. From E-I-E-I-O, off to farm I go, to hi-ho, 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 off to work I go. Culture. Samurai are important. They're a core part of the culture. They're going to attend dramas. They love tales of courage. Again, that Japanese fiction. There's new literature. There's new art. You've got the haiku poetry. 575, 5 syllables. Really based on the idea of images rather than ideas. You get the kabuki theater type of drama, or music, dance, and mime are used to present stories. So, finally, you get Japan kind of unified. Who comes on, knock in on the door? The Portuguese. The Portuguese are like, hey, we've got stuff for you. And the Japanese are like, oh, what? And the Portuguese are like, we were like clocks. Japan's like, okay, we've got eyeglasses. Oh, I can see. Get it? I can see. They say we got tobacco. Our people in America love this tobacco stuff. And then they say they've got firearms. And the daimyo are like, whoa, 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 what was that last thing? And the Portuguese are like, yo, we got guns, son. And the daimyo are like, for real? And the Portuguese are like, oh, totally, dude, we wouldn't lie to you. We're trying to be friends. So the Portuguese, who were hoping to get involved in Japan's trade with China and Southeast Asia, the Japanese were at first eager. So at first, the door is open, right? There's the door, there's the frame, the door's open. Alright? And we already talked about this. They were welcomed. Initially, the first people to show up there are shipwrecked Portuguese, and again, you got guns, let's be friends. Even though the traditional weapon was the sword, they wanted every advantage over other samurai and other. What's interesting is some of the samurais are like, no, it's tradition, I'm going to use a sword, and for that, they paid. Alright. So again, Portuguese come to trade. Daimyo are like, yo, give us those guns. And you've got cannons. Oh my god, then we just become best friends. If we had just enough room, more room for karate, we could become best friends. More room for activities. So these new fortified castles turn into cities with the attractions of artisans, again, becoming more urbane, becoming more city-like, alright? So who comes with the Portuguese? The Christians. The Christians are like, hey, we love you, pray. Alright? And they get welcomed in because they're also selling firearms. So give us their guns and talk to us about religion. There's over 300,000 Japanese converted. The Tokugawa leadership gets upset because these Christians scorn Japanese beliefs. They weren't Japanese. They were European. So if you're loyal to Europe, you're not loyal to Japan, and Tokugawa's going to get mad. He puts, every time they do something European, he writes, I wish there was a dislike button. And what happens is these Christians get involved in local politics, their power goes up. By de facto, if their power goes up, Japanese citizens have to go down. But he didn't do anything because he didn't want to drive off the merchants. Everybody's happy, they're getting their guns, their cannons, their sunglasses, all the neat stuff. But then that changes. We see Jesuits, we see Franciscans, we see Dominicans come in. Again, Tokugawa is upset. He's really upset when they start getting involved in local politics. But here's what's interesting. All of the sudden, boom, boom, the door slammed shut. And I'm sure you're wondering why. By 1612, the shogun banned Christianity and focused on ridding the country of all Christians, forced them all out. Why? And all the Christians were ruthlessly prosecuted. Why? Because about 21 years after Aishi's death in 1637, 30,000 peasants revolted against the shogunate, the emperor, the rules. So they make a logical assumption. Gee, what must those 30,000 peasants be? They must be Christians. So if Christians revolt, it's got to be Christianity's fault. So the door literally slams shut. After that, the Japanese ruthlessly persecuted Christians and forced Japanese citizens to demonstrate to basically Buddhism becomes the enforced religion. All right, and that's going to cause problems between America and Japan later on. So who came? Jesuits, Franciscans, Dominicans. What happened? Conversion. By 1612, the leadership's like, ooh, I'm not sure how I feel about this. The numbers are getting out of line. 1637, you get the revolution. Whose revolution is it? Oh, it must be Christians' fault. This is important. This is important. This right here. Press pause. Press pause. By 1639, the emperor, the shogunate, institute a closed country policy that lasts for more than 200 years. So literally, imagine slamming a door so shut so hard that you can't open it for 200 years. Even as strong as I am and as much weight as I'd have behind it, I couldn't have pulled that off. So what does Japan become? It becomes, gotta keep them isolated. Alright, trade they hated. So again, at first they welcomed it, and then they realized, ooh, let's exclude them. And by 1639, they say trading ain't fine. Anything we want, it will be mine. Only one port was open, Nagasaki, and that only remained open to the Chinese and the Dutch. Alright? Again, they didn't like all this European talk in the country. They go closed door. What's interesting is Japanese citizens were absolutely forbidden to leave as well. So literally, the door slams so shut, you can't get in or out. There's Japanese people on this side knocking, let us out, let us out. There's people on this side locking it in, or locked in. The Japanese people were locked in. The Europeans were locked out. So Japan became very self-sufficient. And for basically 200 years, Japan is basically all by itself. Here's Japan. There's Korea. There's China. There's the places they tried to attack. So, real quick. I'm sorry, that line should be like there. Alright? So you got the three rulers. Uno, dos, tres. This would be a good time to pause. So if this was an essay question, you could either argue yes, or you could argue no, and I'd be okay with that. Alright? Interesting. Compare and contrast the role of women in China to the role of women in Japan. You get the female infanticide. You get food binding and few jobs outside home. So being a Chinese woman is not that enjoyable of opportunity. Japan, there's no female infanticide or foot binding, and they have more job opportunities. But both still had kind of a subservient. They had to listen to their husbands. Most work in fields, and they manage the households. So what we're seeing here is this Far East treatment of women. Worse, bad, overall not good. That's all, yo. Peace.